Hi, friend. This morning we're looking at the book of Galatians, the 6th chapter, verses 1 through 6. Brethren, if anyone is caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, so that you too will not be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But each one must examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone, but not in regard to another. For each one will bear his own load. Thanks be to God for the reading of his word and for the preaching of it. Our lives are measured in all the ways that we deal with people in our lives. We are leaving a record of how we relate to others. Our passage today has to do with a situation that is uncomfortable because we're called to deal with someone who is caught in a trespass. They have sinned in some way, and as children of God, we ache for the ways in which not only they, but we also are prone to hurt ourselves and other people. What does love call for us to do in these situations? Do we not serve a God of restoration? Paul asked the reader to view themselves through the lens of grace. He invites us to not be arrogant or self-righteous, but to be gracious to the one that we are dealing with, because we too are sinners. Real relationships must have both the components of truth and love. We need to be reminded that we indeed are more wicked than we imagine, and that we are more loved than we can imagine. And we need to love each other enough to speak truth to one another when it's necessary. First, examining our own hearts and motives. The spirit in which we speak something will speak louder than any words that we have to say. In the 11th chapter of John, you have Mary and Martha confronting Jesus upon the death of Lazarus. And Martha approaches him and says, "If you had come when I requested, my brother would not have died." In other words, it's your fault. Jesus is not hearing her words so much as he's seeing her heart. He replies, "He will yet live." Martha acknowledges that in the resurrection he will. Then Jesus is just as direct with her in his response as she was with him. He says to her, "I am the resurrection." After that, Mary comes to him and says the same thing, but evidently with a different heart, because it says, in response to Mary, Jesus wept. Paul uses the phrase, bear one another's burdens. He's talking specifically about when somebody has really gone astray and let a whole bunch of people down. He's talking about when one person has let their own fragility, their own foolishness and selfishness damage someone else. It affects, however, more than two people. It affects all the people in these people's lives. It ripples through the whole community so that other people find themselves bearing the cost of a crisis that they themselves did nothing to create. It is such an isolating moment when you realize you're the one who's made life sad and miserable, not just for yourself, but for a whole host of people. It's hard enough to face your own responsibility when you feel so crushed and humiliated. However, it takes a very remarkable person to say, look, I didn't cause this trouble, but I'm going to carry it with you as if I had. I'm going to bear the burden with my friend who got into this mess. And I'm going to take the lead in helping us all see what we can do to try to make things better. Paul wants us to be people like that. Can you think of a time when someone has made a mess of their life or humiliated themselves and maybe brought shame on themselves? What did you do? Did you avoid them, pity them, shame them, assume they'd have to clear up the mess they had made? Did you and the Christian community turn out to be more judgmental than the society at large? Or did you seek them out, offer mercy, show tenderness, share humanity, and bear their burden? If you did, then you fulfilled what Paul calls the law of Christ. We've heard that we must carry our own load, but we've forgotten that when Paul tells us to bear one another's burdens, that's what he calls the law of Christ. According to Paul, there's nothing wrong with being a burden. All of us at some point will need someone to shore us up. It's not a bad thing to be dependent. Dependency creates relationships. When a person is sick or breaks a bone or has a baby or has difficulty getting out of the house, in many cases a whole community gathers around them and relationships are deepened. If you're going to be committed to bearing one another's burdens, you have to be also prepared to let other people bear yours. Here's the difference between all carrying our own burdens, which we call independence, and bearing one another's burdens. Independence expresses respect. And respect is foundation for justice, of dignity, of equality, of all the ways human beings relate to one another. Bearing one another's burdens, however, expresses something beyond respect. It expresses love. Respect is a fine thing, but when you've tasted love, respect feels a little lacking in flavor. Respect is the minimum we offer. It's not the goal. Respect feels rather pale as an imitation of the real thing. As a pastor, I sometimes wonder if people who make such a big play for respect and are so determined to prove their independence, that they aren't somehow people for whom love has painfully gone wrong. I wonder if when we demand respect, when we long for independence, is because we don't dare ask for love. And when we've acquired our hard-won independence, what do we long to do with it? Are we just too afraid to be transparent enough to ask for love? This seems to me there is a point where Paul's two maxims come together. We carry our own load, become independent, for one reason and purpose above all others. That is so that we can learn to bear other people's burdens. We become independent in order that we love. It may come genuinely out of caring concern for others. caring for them more than for our own need to be noticed and needed. We understand we too are sinners, and we have no need to think more highly of ourselves than we ought to. We don't carry one another's everyday burdens. That would show a lack of respect for them. Instead, we carry one another's burdens precisely when they have made a mess. In the end, independence leaves us feeling alone in the world. It can't give us the relationships that truly will enrich and shape and transform our lives. Independence is fine, but the right kind of independence is beautiful. The gospel is that God is never independent of us. He meets us precisely in the most dependent forms, in the form of a tiny baby in a manger, or that of a dying man on a cross. And God meets us when we are most dependent, when we have become a terrible, shameful burden to others. We celebrate our independence, but we should more celebrate our dependency on God and our dependency on one another, because that means we're growing in love and fulfilling the law of Christ. And all God's people said, Amen.